Welcome to the audio file on developing early literacy professional learning communities and PLC materials to support school readiness. This audio file informs interested parties about how to build their capacity to develop PLC materials and implement professional learning communities. While the examples shared here are centered on evidence-based early literacy instruction, the information applies to developing PLCs in any early childhood subject area of interest or need. Listeners of this audio file may become informed and energized to support early childhood education settings by providing collaborative learning experiences for their educators. In turn, early childhood educators will become equipped to deliver evidence-based instruction in their classrooms, which will improve school readiness. This question and answer format features Dr. Marcia Kosanovich and Dr. Beth Phillips, principal investigators of the Regional Educational Laboratory, REL, Southeast School Readiness Partnership. This partnership's purpose is twofold. First, to build the capacity of early childhood stakeholders in the 6-state region to create and implement their own early childhood PLCs. And second, to provide early childhood educators with a collaborative learning experience to expand their knowledge of evidence-based emergent literacy key ideas and strategies. So thank you, Dr. Kosanovich and Dr. Phillips, for being here today to answer these important questions.
Sure, we're happy to be here.
Thank you for getting us together.
I'd like to give listeners some background information on our presenters. Dr. Kosanovich, Chief Executive Officer for MK Educational Research and Practice, LLC, is a literacy educator and researcher with 25 years' experience in teaching and creating professional development and curriculum. Her teaching experience includes pre-K, kindergarten, first grade and third grade, as well as undergraduate and graduate courses. Dr. Kosanovich is the lead author of many literacy documents for educators at the state, district, and school levels. She serves as the Director of Curriculum and Instructional Projects at the Florida Center for Reading Research, where she led the center's review of curricula and the development of the student center activities, which are widely used by teachers across the United States. Dr. Kosanovich was the Deputy Director for the National Center on Instruction for Literacy and led the design and creation of professional development and guidance documents for regional and state-level reading educators. She also served as the Director of Intervention for the Targeted Reading Intervention at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She's currently engaged in school leadership and literacy projects for the REL Southeast at Florida State University. Dr. Phillips is Associate Professor of Educational Psychology and Learning Systems at the Florida State University and Faculty Associate of the Florida Center for Reading Research. Her research addresses many influences on school readiness, especially for early language and literacy development. She has been principal investigator or co-principal investigator on grants funded by the Institute of Education Sciences, IES, National Institutes for Health, NIH, and the Spencer Foundation. And she has published and created professional development materials in the areas of literacy development and instruction, language development, home literacy, and evidence-based instruction in preschool classrooms. For example, in one IES-funded project, Dr. Phillips developed a new vocabulary intervention for at-risk preschool children. In a second IES-funded project, she led the development and evaluation of a small group intervention to support language development for preschool and kindergarten children. Today, Drs. Kosanovich and Phillips will answer questions about the process for developing and conducting early childhood PLCs, using emergent literacy as a focus for the PLCs. I am the moderator, Julie Christman, co-manager of the REL Southeast School Readiness Partnership. Drs. Kosanovich and Phillips, thank you for answering these frequently asked questions about early childhood PLCs. I want to begin with using a common language in our discussion. So, Dr. Kosanovich, let's start with you defining a PLC for our audience.
Sure. A PLC is a professional learning community comprising a group of educators who collaborate to expand their knowledge and enhance their instruction to improve student achievement. Typically, a PLC consists of a team of educators that meets regularly to learn new topics, share ideas, and problem solve. Usually, a trained facilitator leads the group in discussions and activities that have been carefully planned and grounded in research.
Right. A PLC might read and discuss articles or books. A facilitator or team leader may guide the team in learning a new topic, perhaps by using professional development materials designed to walk the team through the content. A PLC also may work together in lesson planning, or a team might attend trainings or conferences in an area of interest or ask an expert to speak to the group.
Why is it important to implement PLCs that promote school readiness, such as literacy, for example, in early childhood settings?
It is vital that students are prepared for kindergarten to become successful in literacy. Early childhood educators across the country have varying degrees of knowledge about evidence-based instructional practices in early literacy that will most effectively prepare students for kindergarten. State and local education agencies seek high-quality professional learning opportunities to strengthen the literacy skills of early childhood educators and encourage their use of effective practices. Providing collaborative learning experiences for public and private pre-kindergarten educators and other early childhood programs will expand their knowledge of evidence-based emergent literacy key ideas and strategies.
Yes, and in turn, early childhood educators will become more knowledgeable in providing 3 to 5-year-old children with evidence-based literacy instruction in their classrooms. Research suggests when teachers are provided with ongoing opportunities for peer-to-peer learning experiences, their knowledge translates to more effective instructional practices, which means kindergartners will be better prepared for their emergent literacy instruction in school.
So, providing early childhood teachers with professional learning about emergent literacy is one way to expand their knowledge in evidence-based literacy instruction?
Absolutely. Early childhood PLCs provide an organized setting in which to address the gap of emergent literacy and language skills in children entering kindergarten. These early childhood educators see firsthand the varying skills children bring to school. Another reason a PLC developed around evidence-based practices is important for early childhood teachers is that many early childhood programs use curricula and instructional materials that are not empirically supported. When PLC materials are vetted and high quality, these teachers are benefiting from evidence-based content to expand their early literacy knowledge. Unfortunately, evidence-based instructional practices may not have been part of pre-service or in-service training.
Dr. Phillips, what are the advantages of PLCs in early childhood settings over other forms of professional development?
There are many advantages to providing PLCs in early childhood settings. First, PLCs add coherence and continuous learning to professional development. They foster teacher learning among peers. PLCs can improve the professional culture of a school because they build professional relationships where everyone is aligned toward the same goal, improving early learning for our children.
What do PLCs look like in early childhood settings?
PLCs could be composed of teachers serving the same or adjacent age groups. They could also include both lead and teacher assistants when appropriate. PLCs could be composed of teachers from across the school, district, or region as feasible. PLCs commonly meet weekly or bi-weekly to maintain momentum in learning, collaboration, planning, and applying what they've learned by practicing strategies in their classrooms. Having a trained facilitator on site establishes a constant support for teachers and sets them up for success as they apply new instructional practices in literacy. This embedded support of teachers' ongoing learning across weeks or months is key to sustaining their professional development. When thinking about who should be included in PLCs, it is important that PLCs are implemented in ways that are sustainable.
Let's talk about the facilitators. Who are they and what qualities should they possess?
There are no cut and dried rules about facilitators of PLCs. However, there are important characteristics and skills that PLC facilitators should possess. They need a strong background in and experience with the content. They also need good communication skills and leadership experience. It's important that facilitators relate well to adult learners.
That's right. And there are instances when the PLC team decides that the role of the facilitator will rotate among the teachers of the PLC. In all these instances, it is important that the materials used are high quality.
What are some important considerations in developing early learning PLC materials? I'm thinking we need to begin by carefully selecting a topic. How should early literacy topics be chosen?
There are no rules about selecting topics. How many different topic areas are selected will depend on whether the PLC intends to meet for just a few weeks, a few months, or for much longer. Early childhood educators may analyze their data to determine areas of need as well. The key for a PLC focused on emergent literacy, for example, is to address one or more of the foundational emergent literacy skills: print knowledge, phonological awareness, and language skills.
Dr. Phillips, how can early childhood leaders ensure the content they're creating is reliable and evidence-based?
There is a lot to consider when developing PLC materials. Keep in mind, this is not an exhaustive list by any means. Ideally, one uses the research literature on the topic to develop content. However, since that can be very time-consuming, there are some high-quality sources of evidence that make it much easier for educators to find information on instructional practices that are evidence-based. For example, for some topics, although not in early childhood, IES has put out practice guides that are a great source for evidence-based information. In addition, the What Works Clearinghouse reviews existing research on different programs, products, practices, and policies in education, including those specific to early childhood. You can go to the WWC website and access reviews of early childhood education interventions and practice guides that help educators implement evidence-based practices. Another resource is the National Early Literacy Panel Report, which reviewed instructional efficacy research published through 2002 for preschool and kindergarten. The IRIS Center also provides summaries of evidence-based practices. Not all instructional practices, even those that may be widely used, have the same amount of research support. Resources like those I mentioned help to sort through practices and identify those that do have evidence.
That is such helpful information for leaders as they begin to develop early childhood professional learning materials. Dr. Kosanovich, what are some other considerations in developing PLC materials?
Once you've determined your topic and evidence base, you must also plan a scope and sequence. The scope includes the content based on evidence, and the sequence is the order in which the content will be delivered, experienced, and discussed. It's also important to think about format. The nature of PLCs is to collaborate with colleagues regarding a shared interest, and typically, the goal of participating in PLCs is to improve student achievement by the improvement of teaching practice. Since PLCs are a form of professional learning, the format of each PLC session is a serious consideration. The format should encourage and facilitate collaboration through, for example, activities and discussion. We recommend a research-based 5-step format.
Teacher engagement is key to their learning. How the teachers will be engaged needs to be carefully planned. For example, will there be collaborative and hands-on activities? What will the discussion questions be? Will there be videos to watch and reflect on? If so, which videos? Will there be any type of activities between sessions? If so, what will they consist of? Will there be handouts, resources, and content to read? Facilitator guidance is another consideration. We discussed the characteristics of good facilitators earlier. If you will have a facilitator of the materials you create, who will train them and how will they be trained? What type of guidance will be provided for the facilitator?
You'll also want to consider collecting feedback. Throughout the development of your PLC materials, it is important to get input from a variety of sources and stakeholders to ensure that the materials are designed to support the intended audience and to achieve the intended outcomes.
That is a lot to consider. Dr. Kosanovich, in this list of considerations I heard, you mentioned an evidence-based 5-step format for PLCs to follow. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, a format is essential. It is important that PLCs are structured to support adults in a collaborative learning cycle. The 5-step process we recommend is adapted from Wald and Castleberry's 5 stages of work for groups engaging in a collaborative learning cycle. The 5 stages are debrief, define and discuss session goals, learn and confirm, collaborative practice, and reflect, plan, implement.
Can you describe each of the steps?
Sure. In the first step, debrief, teachers discuss experiences and reflections about an instructional practice they planned and implemented since the previous session. In the second step, define and discuss session goals, the facilitator gives brief statements about previous session's goals and this session's goal, sort of where we've been and where we're going. Here, the facilitator shares foundational and background information while engaging teachers in discussions and activities. Step 3 is learn and confirm. Teachers explore new practices and compare them to current practices. This is where we access and build teachers' background experiences and knowledge related to the topic of the session. Teachers are explicitly taught the session's content through, for example, models, videos, and discussions. Step 4 is collaborative practice, where teachers collaborate in pairs or small groups to practice applying strategies and activities. And step 5, reflect, plan, implement, is where teachers reflect on what they learned during the session and plan how the activities and strategies will be implemented in their classrooms prior to the next PLC session. Then, for homework, back in their classrooms, teachers will implement their plan. In addition, they could have a video to watch and some reading to prepare for the next session. In this 5-step process, all teachers will be prepared at the start of the next session to share their experiences.
That format sounds engaging. How else do you ensure teacher engagement so that PLCs are meaningful to teachers and support them in bridging the research to their practice? What are the best practices for the design of the PLC materials?
The format is essential, and the content is equally important, especially when it clearly ties the research to teaching strategies teachers can use right away. For example, evidence-based content for teachers to read in self-study prepares them for the upcoming session. It is important that this reading includes the what, why, and how for each instructional practice. As an example, in an emergent literacy PLC, print knowledge content for teachers to read would include what print knowledge is, why it is important, and how to teach it. A strong PLC would then be specific about effective ways to teach print knowledge. The reading may include 2 evidence-based practices: small group explicit instruction and print referencing during read aloud. During the print knowledge sessions, then, teachers would engage in learning about, viewing, discussing, and practicing explicitly teaching print knowledge in small groups and incorporating print referencing during read aloud. Another important feature to include in the content for teachers to read are classroom scenarios that demonstrate effective print knowledge instruction. You also will want to include the early childhood literacy standards for your teachers and collaborative and hands-on activities. Depending on your topic, you may include videos with video viewing guides. You'll also want to include sharing opportunities, lesson plan examples and templates, reflection questions for discussion, and resources for further study.
Earlier, you mentioned it is important to implement PLCs in a way that they will be sustainable. How do you sustain the learning and culture that PLCs provide?
That is such an important question and can be a challenge. If we think of sustainability in terms of maintaining the momentum generated by interaction among members in their regularly scheduled meetings, we consider 3 elements. First, we must ensure that evidence-based instructional practices are routine. This requires our second element, leadership support and peer-to-peer support, which is key to collaborative learning, especially when putting research to practice. And finally, you must have follow-up.
So support is embedded then for both the facilitator and the teachers in PLCs?
Yes, when facilitators are prepared and use high-quality professional development materials that incorporate a framework for each session, such as a 5-step process, discussion questions, small and whole group activities with directions, and videos with key points, their support is embedded within their training and materials. Teachers benefit twofold with ongoing facilitator support and collaborative peer-to-peer support. Teachers who receive ongoing support and professional development that is directly tied to their day-to-day practices are more likely to make positive changes to their practices and to sustain those changes.
Thank you, Drs. Kosanovich and Phillips, for this enlightening discussion on developing early childhood PLCs and PLC materials to support school readiness. We hope that listeners have been informed and energized to support early childhood education settings by providing collaborative professional learning experiences. With your intentional support, early childhood educators will become equipped to deliver evidence-based instruction in their classrooms.